Richard came back, and he got a van or a truck, and he started moving art. The next year, Philip came back, and Richard gave the key to the truck to Philip, and Richard went to teach at Queens, and for that first year, Philip was transporting art. Also during that time, the transformation of going from that to going into plumbing.
Taxi cab driver too.
Taxi cab driving, and also the plumbing went from Philip to Connie Beckley, where she was doing plumbing. So I mean, it was this element of they were sharing. We don't have any of that.
Do you keep in touch with
the last
Bill?
20 years?
Do you keep in touch with Bill at all?
Yes,
Bill Beckley?
sister, his young sister.
But
she
do you
used
keep
to
in touch
sing
with-
in their group.
Right, I know.
Bill
Well,
Beckley.
they stayed at the farm in Fleetwood numbers of
Yeah.
times.
Where's Bill Beckley?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering about.
Oh, Bill's at 55 Mercer. He lives up on the 4th floor, I think it is. And,
Wow.
well, he does, most of his work is sold in Europe.
In what?
Interesting
Where'd
guy.
you live in Fleetwood?
Right below the twin churches
See,
with
after,
Dean and Nancy.
when it came
Oh,
into the
that's
80s,
never
it was
there.
about money.
Oh, okay.
You know,
Near the hen
and
farm?
Yeah.
The whole,
I don't think of that as
the
Fleetwood.
whole
I think of that
thing,
as-
all you have
Yeah,
to
it
do
was
is
a
look
Fleetwood.
at Soho. and you can
Yeah,
see
I know. They
the
call
dress.
everything
Yeah, it's
Fleetwood.
kind of far away from Fleetwood.
Mine dress is Goodstone, but I don't
It
live
wasn't
about
about
6
space
miles from Goodstone.
and living. It was
Yeah, it
about
was,
No, I know what
money.
you mean.
a
Yeah,
nice, nice
government,
place.
money.
Nice place.
Reagan
Carmelita was still alive.
Sarah has said in interviews that Philip Glass would actually contribute ideas to Sarah's
on the
work.
periphery of some.
They would actually, kind of almost collaborate.
Oh, man, I mean, I should really look
I
at more
would
because I don't even
think
know half of what went on.
Yeah,
I would know no reason
I
why
lived
not,
around
because,
there.
yes, they were, but that went
It's
on.
been there for 60 years, and we still think of this as.
Yeah, it was more communal. And of course, there was the 60s thing and all that.
I mean, it was just
But, I've been there longer than most of them.
really exciting
think they belong. Pennsylvania Dutch or something.
environment.
Pioneer years.
H. Brown.
Pioneer years. That was the early years when it was just gone.
He actually went to I drove him
I mean,
to
the
Manhattan.
first person I called when I
Think back on all that stuff.
was inviting in was Donald
First
Church.
Earth Day was then, you know.
I called him and he
No, I
said he wasn't interested,
Penn
but there
State,
were
and I
two names
graduated
that
in
came in.
1970, so I was
I looked
there
up the two names,
Yeah.
and
until
the first person I had in
late
was
70,
David
and then I
Rabinowitz.
moved to where I live now.
I went
My dad was there.
to get a hold of
I've been
him.
there since then, pretty much.
I had to find out where he showed the
Europe
gallery,
and Middle East and Africa,
the
But I was,
gallery
that was
he
my
was showing
home
me
base.
was the
I had a girlfriend in New
which
York
was
for a
running
couple of
from
years. I was
65,
there half the time, in the 80s.
yeah, 65 to 70.
But I mean, I knew
Klaus
Nancy
Curtis.
from Penn
Klaus
State.
Curtis.
I mean,
When did you
before
become aware
she
of
ever
the,
was around here? Her
influence
brother
of
went to Penn State,
the
and she lived in
French
some log
theory
cabin out in the
people,
woods, and I saw
deconstructionists,
her.
on writing and film and stuff like that?
Yeah, she lived in Reading or something.
Yeah,
She grew up
Reading.
in Reading.
Exactly. Why miss
So
it?
that's when I met her.
Right.
And then I kind of lost touch with her. And then I saw her years later.
I wouldn't say it was at that
They'd
time.
adopted a kid. She was already remarried.
I would say it was people I had read about. First, because I trained as a visual artist.
So yeah, you should keep in touch. I mean, I sort of knew some of those people just because.
But I was reading also about dancers and musicians,
whatever,
which I knew nothing
And
about.
then I'd see his
I
name
still
on something later. And then I just read a
But-
book.
When I started the
Bobby Whitlock.
program, then I wanted to have them in. It wasn't just visual.
But eventually that, and I don't know exactly when it happened,
Yeah.
but eventually that French deconstruction stuff got into the education, liberal arts departments in education, right? And that was right around the 70s or somewhere.
Well, you won't find that in the public
It's on the
education.
bestseller list at Amazon or something. Bobby Whitlock's autobiography. He went through hell
You would find it in some of the
and fascinating cars, Maseratis wrapped around trees.
some of the graduate programs.
Survived. Now he's in Austin. He lives in Austin.
Yeah.
I mean the whole postmodern philosophical development, Homo or whatever. I mean, it had to be associated with the postmodern moments in art and music. No, I mean, I would have thought. I wasn't aware of it. I was aware of female, women's liberation, which was one of the early demonstrations of deconstruction. Deconstructionists. I was aware of that when I was in college, up from '68 to '72. So it was already starting to infect the adolescent society or the young student society. But that whole I guess the thing that describes it most is the anything goes idea that came out of postmodernism. Anything goes, like get rid of the standards, and like.
Postmodernism didn't really coalesce till even in the 80s.
Well, French deconstructionists started rolling and making a big impact in the early 70s.
Out of philosophy?
And education and literature and psychology.
Yeah, but it came from philosophy.
Who were some of the writers that you're referring to that got that movement?
Diderot.
Diderot. There are lots of them. I can't think of them right now.
So then that migrated to the American youth culture?
No, art.
Well, no, it affected criticism first. Literary criticism was the first focus of it. They started tearing apart language and tearing apart, what things actually mean and whether anything
came out of
means
Dada?
anything.
Dada.
No, it was much later than that.
Later
it was in
than
the 60s and late 60s and early 70s and into the 80s.
Yeah, who's the guy that did the for a political critique of the sign? I'm not. Gene.
Feuerabend was one name. What are some of the other ones? Oh my God, they slip my mind right now. But there's a ton of them, and there's
Guattari.
That's a piece of the puzzle I have.
Very famous French psychiatrist, a psychological theorist, very, very dense. All of this writing, if you read the deconstructionist writing, it's so dense and convoluted you can't make any sense out of it. I can. And
well, that's like some of these
it boggles
artists.
my mind that anybody else can either.
Some
but
of these artists
they do.
that started using that as their basis for making their art. One of the authors.
This was. I'm sure this philosophy was absolutely critical input. To that early.
One of the artists had a
Coming
show,
into
and then
conceptual
one of the
concept.
writers who wrote the original stuff came to look at it, and he said, "People better wait till everybody's dead before they do this, because it's just like has nothing really to do with what we wrote. They're just like, it sounds good, so they're making art based on our philosophy." He said, "You got to wait till everybody's dead, because this has really nothing to do with what we wrote in the first place."
This guy I mentioned earlier, Sylvain Lautringer, who is a professor at Columbia still. He's a Frenchman. And he was a very active young mind. He came to New York in the 60s in search of, the art scene, what was happening. He knew it was happening. I don't know how he knew it was happening, but he did. He did, for example, an extended interview prior to that with Artaud, who was by then completely nuts. I think he interviewed him in a lunatic asylum for days or weeks or whatever, and compiled a huge interview with him. And that's the sort of thing this young Sylvain Lautringer was into. And he became, a proponent of postmodern thinking and French theory. And anyway, off the subject, he came to New York to look for artists and see what was going on. And he actually approached Philip Glass and Steve Reich and a couple of other guys that he knew at the time, the names of which he knew at the time, and he told them what he was after, and they said, go see Jack Smith. Jack Smith lived down in the Lower East Village and was this just completely off the wall, idealistic artist who thought that museums should be open for 24 hours a day if they were going to be open at all. But he hated the idea of ownership of art and commoditization.